Ethan had spent most of his life far from noise, far from crowds, and far from the worries that townspeople carried on their shoulders. His ranch sat on a wide piece of land, where the wind moved over the grass like a slow river. Here, the days were long but peaceful, and the nights were quiet, except for the sound of insects and the soft creaking of wood when the temperature dropped. People in town knew Ethan as a quiet cowboy who preferred the company of his horses to the company of men. He spoke little, worked hard, and rarely invited anyone into his home. It was not that he disliked people. He had simply grown used to being alone. That evening, the sun had already dipped below the hills, leaving behind a faint orange glow that slowly faded into blue. Ethan was brushing down his horse, Jasper, giving him one last check before closing the barn for the night. The air smelled of dry hay and warm soil. He was thinking of making a simple dinner and perhaps reading an old book before sleeping early. His life followed a pattern, day after day, and he felt comfortable in that rhythm. But the quiet of his evening changed suddenly. As he was locking the barn door, he heard the sound of hooves in the distance. At first, he thought it might be a stray animal or a wandering cow, but then he noticed the uneven pattern of the steps, slow and slightly dragging. It didn't sound like a healthy horse. He stood still for a moment, listening as the sound grew closer. Then he saw a large figure approaching through the fading light. A woman rode toward him, tall even while sitting on her saddle, her shoulders broad, her movements controlled but tired. Her long coat was dusty from travel, and the horse she rode on limped heavily. Ethan stepped forward, concerned about the condition of the animal. When she reached the front of his ranch house, she pulled the reins gently and looked at him with tired but alert eyes. "Evening," she said, in a calm voice that carried the weight of many long days. Ethan nodded politely. "Evening. Your horse seems hurt." "A.M." She nodded slowly. "Yes." He stepped on something sharp. "I didn't see it in the dark. I'm afraid he can't walk much more tonight." Her voice was strong, but Ethan could hear the worry beneath it. He also noticed something else. She was taller than most women he had ever seen. Not unusual enough to be strange, but tall enough that people might call her a giant in a joking way. She carried herself with confidence, yet exhaustion was clear in her posture. "You're far from town," Ethan said. "It gets dangerous in the dark. You can't ride him any farther like this." "I know," she replied quietly. "That's why I stopped. I wasn't sure if anyone lived out here. But I hoped." Ethan looked at the horse again, then at her. Normally, he didn't bring strangers into his home. He liked his privacy, and he valued quiet more than anything. But she looked like she had been on the road for hours, maybe days. Her boots were covered in dust, and her shoulders sagged as if carrying far more than just her travel gear. "You can stay here for the night," Ethan said finally. "There's a guest room, and I can check on your horse in the morning." For a moment, she just stared at him, surprised. Then, her expression softened. "Thank you," she said. "I really appreciate it. My name is Mara." "Ethan," he replied. He led her inside the house while she walked beside him. As they entered, Ethan felt a strange twist of nervousness. He had not shared space with another person in a long time, and he wasn't used to the presence of someone so strong-looking. Mara stood almost a head taller than him, and her shadow stretched across the wooden floor. But there was no harshness in her face, only tiredness. The house was simple. Wooden walls, an old table, a small fireplace, and a shelf of books. Ethan wasn't rich, but he kept everything clean. The low light from the oil lamp gave the room a warm feel. Mara looked around with quiet admiration. "It's peaceful here," she said. Ethan nodded, taking off his hat. "It's quiet. That's how I like it." Her tired eyes softened even more. "Quiet is rare. I haven't had much of it," for a long time. Ethan motioned for her to sit while he went to wash his hands. He heated some food, nothing fancy, just beans and bread, but warm enough to comfort after a long ride. When he brought it to the table, Mara accepted it gratefully. She ate slowly, as if her body was finally remembering what it felt like to rest. For a while, neither spoke. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable, just unfamiliar. Ethan watched her from the corner of his eye. Her face was strong and defined, but there was something gentle in the way she held her spoon, something careful in the way she looked around the room. She was used to being alert, maybe even guarded. After a few minutes, Mara broke the silence. "I didn't mean to trouble you. I usually stay outdoors or in old barns, but with the horse injured and the sky getting dark." Her voice faded for a moment. "I didn't want to be out there tonight." "You're not troubling me," Ethan said honestly. "Anyone would have helped." She lifted her eyes to him, searching his face for a moment. Then, she gave a small smile. "That's kind of you. Not everyone would say that." Ethan shrugged lightly. Kindness wasn't something he thought about. He just did what felt right. But something about Mara's words lingered with him. What kind of life had she lived, where simple kindness felt rare? The wind picked up outside, pushing against the windows. Mara pulled her coat tighter around herself. Though she looked strong, her hands trembled slightly from the cold. "You can warm up by the fire," Ethan said. "I'll get more wood." When he returned with the logs, he found her standing near the fireplace, staring into the flames as if lost in thought. The warm light reflected on her face, making her look less tired and more human, more vulnerable. She seemed less like the giant people might name her, and more like someone who had carried her strength for far too long. Ethan placed a blanket on the chair beside her. She thanked him softly, almost shyly. The moment surprised him. Someone who appeared so powerful, carrying such gentle manners. As the night grew deeper, Ethan showed her the guest room. The bed was simple, the blanket old but warm. Mara stood at the doorway, staring at the room as if it was something precious. "You sure?" she asked. "This is too generous." "You need rest," Ethan said. "That's all." She nodded slowly, her eyes filled with a quiet gratitude that she didn't know how to express. Ethan wished her good night and stepped away, expecting to return to his own room. But as he turned, he heard her voice again. "Ethan?" He stopped and looked back. "Thank you," she said softly. "This means more than you know." Ethan didn't fully understand what she meant, but he felt something stir inside him, a feeling he hadn't felt in a long time. Something that told him this unexpected meeting might change more than just one quiet evening on the ranch. And as he walked back to his room, he realized that for the first time in a long time, he wasn't thinking about silence. He was thinking about the tall stranger sleeping under his roof and the strange comfort her presence brought to his lonely life. The storm that had begun outside only grew stronger as the night continued, and Ethan could hear the wind pressing against the windows like a restless traveler begging for entry. After leaving Mara in the guest room, he went to his own room and sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the storm's long cries. He was used to nights like this. Storms were common on the open land, but tonight felt different. The house didn't feel as heavy. It didn't feel as empty. There was someone else breathing under the same roof. Someone who carried stories he didn't yet know. And for reasons he couldn't explain, the thought made him feel strangely awake. He lay down, but sleep didn't come easily. He kept thinking of Mara, her tired eyes, her quiet voice, the way she looked at the fire, as if every flicker carried a memory. She had spoken little during dinner, yet her silence had felt full, not empty. He wondered where she had been, what she had seen, and why she seemed to carry a kind of hidden pain she didn't talk about. He didn't want to intrude, but he felt curious, almost protective. After an hour of turning in bed, he sighed and got up again. He walked quietly through the hallway, careful not to disturb Mara. When he reached the main room, he saw the fire had dimmed, its flames sinking into glowing embers. He stirred the wood a little to keep it alive. The warmth felt good in the cold night. Just as he was about to return to his room, he heard a soft sound behind him, like the gentle shuffle of feet on wood. He turned and saw Mara standing in the doorway, wrapped in the blanket he had given her. Her hair was slightly messy from sleep, and her face, touched by the warm light of the fire, looked softer than before. "Sorry," she said quietly. "I didn't mean to wake you." "You didn't," Ethan replied. "I couldn't sleep." Mara stepped closer, her movements slow and careful, as if she wasn't sure if she was welcome. She stood near the fire and extended her hands to warm her fingers. Ethan could see she was still cold. "The storm woke me," she said. "Or maybe I'm just not used to sleeping in a real bed." Ethan raised an eyebrow. She hesitated, then gave a short smile that held no joy. "Most nights, I sleep on the ground. Barn floors, old sheds, places where I can't expect comfort. So a bed feels strange." Ethan felt something tighten in his chest. It bothered him to imagine someone living that way. "You must have traveled a lot." All my life," she answered. "Never stayed anywhere for long." He didn't push for more details. He could tell she wasn't ready to share everything. Instead, he added more wood to the fire and gestured toward the table. "Would you like some warm tea? Might help you sleep." Her eyes brightened in a small, grateful way. "I'd like that." Ethan boiled water and prepared simple tea with herbs he grew near the barn. The scent filled the room with a gentle warmth. They sat across from each other, the fire glowing between them. Mara wrapped her hands around the cup, letting the heat sink slowly into her palms. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like two people learning to breathe in the same space. Mara finally broke the quiet. "I didn't expect someone like you to live alone," she said softly. "Your home is warm. It feels safe." Ethan blinked in surprise. "Most people don't think much about my place." "They should," she replied. "It has a soul. Some homes feel empty. Some feel heavy. But this one," she looked around slowly, "it feels like a place someone cared for, even if they were alone." Her words struck him in a place he rarely let anyone touch. He had lived alone for so many years that he'd forgotten his home could feel warm to someone else. Forgotten that his quiet life might look different through another person's eyes. He cleared his throat. "I guess I take care of it because it's all I have." She nodded slowly. "And that makes it even more precious." Ethan watched her face as she spoke. She looked different from when she arrived. Her expression carried less exhaustion and more understanding. He wondered how she could read so much, so quickly. After a moment, she rested her cup down and leaned back slightly. "Can I tell you something?" she asked. "You can tell me anything," Ethan answered, surprising even himself with the softness in his voice. Mara took a long breath. She kept her eyes fixed on the fire, as if speaking to its glow instead of him. "People call me a giant," she said quietly. "Sometimes as a joke, sometimes not. I'm taller than most women, stronger than some men, and I learned early that I needed to act tough so people wouldn't try to take advantage of me." Ethan said nothing. He let her speak. "I worked hard, jobs, ranch jobs, traveling jobs, anything that paid enough for me to move to the next place. But I never stayed long, because people never saw me as normal. And when they did talk to me, it was always about my size or my strength, never about who I was. Not once did anyone sit with me and talk like I was just human." Her voice didn't break, but it trembled just a little, enough for Ethan to feel her words in his chest. "That's why I keep moving," she continued. "It's easier to leave than to stay where you don't feel you belong." Ethan looked down at his hands. He understood her more than she realized. He, too, had lived a life shaped by distance. Distance from people, from noise, from the possibility of being disappointed. "You belong here tonight," Ethan said quietly. "And nothing about you feels strange to me." Mara's head lifted, and she looked at him with an expression he had never seen on her face. It wasn't surprise or gratitude. It was relief. A deep, silent relief that made her eyes soften. "You really mean that?" she asked. "I do." The storm continued to beat against the windows. But inside the room, the atmosphere had shifted. They were no longer two strangers, forced together by chance. They were two lonely people sharing something neither had felt in a long time understanding. Mara took another sip of her tea, her shoulders relaxing. "This is the first peaceful evening I've had in years," she admitted. "I wasn't expecting that when I knocked on your door." Ethan smiled gently. "I wasn't expecting company." She laughed softly, just a small breath of laughter, but it changed her entire face. It made her seem less like the strong traveler and more like the woman underneath. The woman who had been alone too long. After a while, Mara stood up, still holding the blanket around her. "I think I can sleep now," she said. "Thank you for listening." "You're welcome anytime," Ethan said. "Good night, Mara." "Good night, Ethan." She walked back toward the guest room, her steps lighter than before. Ethan watched until she disappeared down the hallway. He felt a warm heaviness in his chest, not troubling, not confusing, but comforting. Something about Mara's presence filled a space he didn't know was empty. And when he finally returned to his own room, this time, he fell asleep quickly, with the soft memory of Mara's quiet smile lingering in his thoughts. Morning arrived slowly, with pale sunlight stretching across the sky like soft paint. The storm had passed, leaving behind clear air and the smell of wet earth. Ethan woke earlier than usual, partly because he wanted to check on Mara's horse, and partly because he had grown strangely aware that someone else was living under his roof. He got dressed, washed his face, and stepped outside. The ground was damp, the grass shining with morning dew, and the sky was a quiet blue that always made him feel calm. As he walked toward the barn, he noticed something that surprised him. Mara was already awake. She stood beside her injured horse, gently brushing its neck with slow, caring strokes. The horse leaned into her touch, trusting her completely. She was tall, strong, and broad-shouldered, but the way she handled the animal was soft, almost delicate. For a moment, Ethan simply watched her silently, admiring the way she carried both strength and gentleness together. Mara heard footsteps and turned. When she saw Ethan, her serious expression softened. "Good morning," she said quietly. "Morning," Ethan replied. "You're up early." "I didn't sleep much after dawn," she said. "Hard to change old habits, I guess. I'm used to waking before the sun." Ethan nodded. He understood that kind of life well. "How's your horse?" "He's better," she said, running her hand down the animal's leg. "Still hurting, but he can put weight on it now. He just needs rest." Ethan knelt to inspect the leg himself. "You cleaned it well. You did a good job." Mara looked almost embarrassed by the compliment. "I tried," she answered softly. They walked back to the house together, and Ethan heated water for breakfast. Mara sat near the window, her eyes moving over the land outside. She seemed lost in thought, as if trying to understand the silence, the openness, the feeling of safety she wasn't used to. Ethan placed a warm plate in front of her. She thanked him and ate slowly, not out of caution but because she was enjoying each moment of calm. After a while, she looked up at him, her voice steady but quiet. "Ethan," she said, "there's something I want to tell you." He paused. She put down her fork and folded her hands gently. Her expression was serious, her eyes soft. "Last night, When I said I haven't had a peaceful evening in years, I wasn't just talking. I meant every word. Ethan nodded, encouraging her to continue. She took a slow breath. All my life, I've lived in places where I had to stay alert. I've worked jobs where I had to act strong, act tough, act like nothing could hurt me. People saw me as a giant. Some joked about it. Some were rude. Some were afraid of me. Very few ever talked to me like a normal woman. And because of that, I learned not to trust anyone. Ethan listened without interrupting. He wasn't a man who easily shared his own feelings. But he knew how to listen deeply. Mara's eyes glistened slightly, not in tears, but in emotion she had never expressed before. She continued. When I knocked on your door last night, I expected another cold evening. I expected a stranger who didn't care. But instead, you looked at me like I was just a traveler who needed help. You didn't look surprised by my height. You didn't stare. You didn't judge. You just invited me in. Ethan swallowed gently. He didn't realize his simple actions had meant so much. I don't know if you understand what that meant to me, Mara said. For years, I've been strong because I had no choice. But last night, for the first time, I felt safe. Truly safe. Ethan lowered his gaze for a moment, not out of shame, but out of the weight of her honesty. Mara nodded once, then looked directly at him. And that is what I meant when I said, tonight will be my first real experience. I wasn't talking about something romantic or physical. I meant that it was my first experience of safety. My first experience of peace. My first experience of feeling like I could let my guard down. Ethan raised his eyes to meet hers. Her expression was open, vulnerable, courageous. She wasn't embarrassed by her words. She wasn't hiding her feelings. She was sharing a truth she had never spoken aloud before. I understand, Ethan said quietly. And I'm honored that you trusted me enough to say it. Mara gave a small smile, an honest, grateful smile. I didn't know who else to say it to. She looked out the window again. The sky was brighter now, and sunlight touched her face in a gentle glow. The strength in her shoulders softened. She looked both powerful and fragile in the same moment. Ethan felt something shift inside himself. A feeling that came slowly and quietly, like morning light creeping through a window. He wasn't used to feeling connected to someone so quickly, but he couldn't deny the truth. Mara had touched a part of him he thought had dried out years ago. After breakfast, they stepped outside again. Mara walked along the open land, her long strides calm and thoughtful. Ethan followed, giving her space, but staying close enough if she needed him. The land was peaceful, and the morning breeze moved the grass like slow waves. Mara stopped near the edge of the fence and leaned her hands on the wooden rail. She took a deep breath of the clean air. This place feels different, she said. It feels like it understands people who are tired. Ethan stood beside her. This land saved me once, he said quietly. When my parents passed away, I didn't know where to go or what to do. I came here, and somehow, I started breathing again. Mara turned toward him, surprised. I didn't know. I don't talk about it much, Ethan admitted. But since you shared something with me, I figured maybe I should share something too. She listened carefully, offering him the same respect he had given her. This ranch is the only place where I felt like I could heal, Ethan continued. It's quiet. It doesn't ask for much. It just lets me live. Mara looked at him in a way she hadn't before, like she was seeing not just the quiet cowboy but the man behind the silence. Then, maybe we're not so different, she said softly. Ethan nodded. Maybe not. They stood together for a long moment, watching the land stretch endlessly before them. They didn't need words. Their shared silence was full of meaning. Two lonely people, each with a past that had shaped them, now stood side by side with a new understanding growing between them. As they walked back to the house, Mara brushed her fingers gently against the fence, as if touching something she didn't want to lose. Ethan watched her, and he could see the change, small, but important. She was relaxing, trusting, settling in. When they reached the porch, she paused and looked at him. "Thank you again, Ethan. Yesterday, I arrived here by accident. Today, I'm starting to feel like I'm exactly where I needed to be." Ethan felt warmth spread through his chest. "You're welcome here," he said simply. And in that moment, both of them knew something important, something neither had expected. This was no longer just a place for Mara to rest. It was becoming a place where she could breathe, where she could heal, and where something new, something gentle and real was beginning to grow. Night returned to the ranch with a calm softness, very different from the storm of the night before. The sky was clear, almost silver with the glow of stars, and the breeze carried the quiet sound of insects hiding in the grass. Ethan lit the lamps inside the house, letting the warm yellow light fill the rooms. The place felt different now, still the same walls, the same furniture, the same old wood scent, but the air carried a new kind of warmth. It came from the simple knowledge that he wasn't alone tonight. Mara had helped him through the day. She had walked beside him in the pasture, checked the fences, helped feed the horses, and even fixed a loose board on the porch with steady hands and silent focus. Ethan had watched her without making it obvious. There was a surprising comfort in seeing someone else move through his space, work with him, share small moments of quiet. He didn't say it aloud, but he liked having her there. When the sun finally set, painting the land orange before slipping behind the hills, Ethan cooked dinner. Mara offered to help, but he told her she had worked enough for one day. So she sat at the table, watching him with quiet curiosity. It felt strange to Ethan being watched. He had lived so long unseen that it felt almost new to have someone pay attention to the small things he did. After dinner, they moved to the fireplace. Ethan added wood, and the flames rose slowly, warming the room with a soft glow. Mara sat on the floor near the fire, her long legs crossed, her elbows resting on her knees. She looked peaceful in a way Ethan hadn't seen before. He sat in his usual chair, holding a warm mug, but his eyes kept finding her face. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Not because they didn't have anything to say, but because silence between them had become comfortable. It wasn't empty. It was quiet in a meaningful way, like both of them were letting the warmth of the fire sink into the parts of themselves that had been cold for too long. Mara eventually broke the silence, her voice low and thoughtful. "What does?" Ethan asked. "This," she said, making a small motion with her hand. "Sitting here, calm, safe, talking to someone without worrying what they're thinking of me." Ethan leaned his head slightly. "Is it really that rare for you?" "One. Round. More rare than you think," Mara replied with a faint smile. "Most people I meet only see me from the outside. They see my size, my strength, and they assume I don't need softness or kindness. But everyone needs those things. Even me." Ethan looked at her, really looked at her. "I think strength and gentleness can exist in the same person." Mara's smile grew a little warmer. "I wish more people thought like you." She shifted slightly closer to the fire. The light made her face glow with warmth. And for the first time, Ethan noticed how tired she still looked. Not the kind of tired that comes from work, but the deeper kind, the tiredness that builds after years of carrying worries alone. Ethan set his mug down. "You can rest here," he said softly. "You're safe." Mara lowered her eyes. "I know. And that's the strange part. I'm not used to trusting places. Or people. Then maybe this can be the first place," he said. She looked up slowly, and their eyes met. There was something silent, but powerful in the moment. Ethan didn't know what it was, but it settled in the air between them, like a quiet promise. They stayed by the fire until late evening. The flames flickered gently, and the warmth filled the room. Mara eventually leaned her back against the couch, pulling the blanket he had given her around her shoulders. Ethan watched her with a soft curiosity. She looked peaceful, completely peaceful for the first time since she arrived. He didn't want to disturb her, but she suddenly opened her eyes and looked at him. "Ethan," she said, her voice low, almost hesitant, "can I tell you something else?" "Of course," he said. She took a moment to gather her thoughts. "Last night, when I slept in the guest room, I had a strange feeling." "What kind of feeling?" he asked gently. "A feeling that surprised me," she said. "I lay down, expecting to stay awake the whole night, like I usually do. But instead, I fell asleep." Ethan blinked, unsure why that was important. "Is that unusual for you?" "Very," she replied. "Most nights, I stay awake listening for noises. I wait for something to go wrong. I sleep lightly. Sometimes I don't sleep at all. But here, last night, I trusted the walls. I trusted the roof. And I trusted you." Ethan felt something warm and deep stir inside him. Something he couldn't name, but could feel clearly. To earn the trust of someone who trusted no one, someone who had wandered for years without a home, someone who always stayed alert, felt like receiving a rare gift. "I'm glad," he said simply, because simple was the only honest way he could speak. Mara nodded, her face softening. "Tonight, I think I'll sleep even better." Ethan smiled quietly. "I hope you do." Before she went to bed, they stepped outside for a moment. The night air was cool, and the stars above looked endless, like tiny lanterns spread across a dark sky. Mara tilted her head up to look at them, her expression full of calm wonder. "I've seen many skies," she said quietly. "But this one feels different." "How so?" Ethan asked. "It feels safe," she whispered. "That's not a word I've used much in my life." Ethan felt the truth in her voice. He didn't try to explain the sky or offer deep words. He simply stood beside her, letting their shared silence say everything. Finally, she turned to him. "Thank you, Ethan, for today, for everything." "You're welcome," he said. "Anytime." Mara walked back inside and headed to the guest room. Ethan watched her go, feeling an unusual heaviness settle in his chest. A heaviness that came from caring. He didn't know when it had begun. Maybe when he first saw her by the barn that morning. Maybe when she shared her story. Maybe even the moment she stood on his porch the first night. He didn't know, but he felt it now. Strong and steady. Later, after she closed the door of her room, Ethan walked quietly to his own. But before entering, he paused near her door. Not too close. Just close enough to sense her presence. He whispered softly, though she couldn't hear him. "You're safe here. I'll make sure of it." He returned to his room, lay down, and for the first time in a long while, fell into a peaceful sleep, knowing someone else was sleeping safely under his roof. Meanwhile, in the quiet darkness of the guest room, Mara curled under the blanket, her breathing slow and steady, her body relaxing completely. She felt something she hadn't felt since she was a child, the feeling of being home, even if it wasn't truly hers yet. And that night, they both slept deeply. Two lonely souls, finding comfort in the quiet way their lives had started to connect. Morning sunlight slowly filled the ranch with soft golden light. Birds moved through the branches outside, their voices gentle and cheerful after the calm night. Ethan woke earlier than usual, not because of work, but because his mind had been quietly waiting for the new day. For the first time in a long while, he felt a strange excitement, not loud or wild, but warm and steady, like a slow-burning fire that made the morning feel different. He stepped outside and breathed in the fresh air. The ground was firm now, no longer wet from the storm. The grass swayed lightly, and the land stretched out wide and peaceful, as if welcoming the new day. Ethan took a moment to absorb the view. He had seen this land every day for years. But today, something about it seemed fuller, brighter, as if someone's presence had filled the empty spaces he had grown used to. When he turned back to the house, he saw Mara at the doorway. She stood there quietly, her tall figure outlined by the light behind her. Her hair was slightly messy from sleep, and she held the blanket around her shoulders. She looked peaceful, more peaceful than he had seen her before. "Good morning," she said softly. Ethan smiled. "Morning. Did you sleep well?" She nodded slowly. "Better than I have in years. I didn't wake up once during the night." "That's good," Ethan said. "You needed rest." She stepped out onto the porch and looked over the land. She took a deep breath, letting the fresh morning air fill her chest. "It feels like the world is lighter today." Ethan glanced at her. "Maybe it is." They walked together to check on her horse. The animal looked calmer, chewing hay slowly. He lifted his injured leg, but didn't show as much pain as before. Mara knelt beside him and ran her hand gently along his neck. "He's healing faster than I expected," she said. "He'll be all right," Ethan replied. "Give him a few more days, and he'll be strong again." Mara smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. "You've done a lot for us." Ethan shook his head. "I didn't do anything special." "Yes," she said quietly. "You did." There was a pause between them. Not awkward, but meaningful. Mara looked around the ranch, the barn, the fence line, the open fields, the quiet house. She was seeing it not just as a place she had stayed, but as a place that had touched something deep inside her. After breakfast, they sat outside on the porch. The sun warmed the wood beneath their feet, and a gentle breeze carried the smell of grass across the open space. They talked about small things, places Mara had been, jobs Ethan used to do, stories about stubborn horses, and funny moments they had experienced alone. Each story carried something personal, something honest, something real. Mara laughed more that morning than she had in months. Ethan enjoyed hearing the sound. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was soft, the kind of laugh a person uses when they feel safe. After a while, Mara grew quiet. She looked down at her hands, then at the land, then finally at Ethan. "There's something I've been thinking about," she said slowly. Ethan waited. "I came here by accident," she said. "I wasn't planning to stay long. I didn't even know if you would open your door to me. But now," she took a breath, "now, I don't know if I want to leave." Ethan felt his heart shift gently, like a slow step forward. "You don't have to leave," he said quietly. Mara blinked, surprised. "You mean that?" "I do," Ethan said. "You can stay here for as long as you want. You can rest. You can work with me if you like. Or you can just take your time deciding what you want next." Mara looked at him in a way she hadn't before. Her eyes softened, and her shoulders seemed to relax even more. "I've never stayed anywhere without feeling pressure to move again." Ethan nodded. "Maybe this can be the first place." She smiled, and it was a smile full of trust, full of something new, something hopeful. "I'd like that," she whispered. For a moment, they just sat quietly, both understanding how important those simple words were. Mara staying wasn't just a choice. It was a step toward healing, a step toward belonging somewhere for the first time in years. Later, they walked across the land together. Mara followed the fence line, studying each post carefully. "You could use a bit of help repairing this," she said with a teasing smile. Ethan laughed softly. "I was thinking the same thing." They fixed loose boards, carried supplies, talked, and worked side by side. Mara's strength made the work easier, and Ethan's calm guidance made it smoother. They moved in quiet teamwork, learning each other's pace, each other's rhythm. Hours passed without either of them noticing the time. When afternoon came, Mara stood with her hands on her hips, looking proudly at the improved fence. "Not bad," she said. Not bad at all, Ethan agreed, watching her with warmth in his eyes. They sat down on a small hill overlooking the ranch. The sun hung low, casting long shadows. The light touched Mara's face gently, making her look calmer than ever. She hugged her knees to her chest and looked across the acres of land, her expression thoughtful. I used to think there was no such thing as peace, she said. That maybe it was something other people had. Not me. Ethan turned to her. What about now? She looked at him, her eyes warm and steady. Now, I think I was wrong. They sat together for a long time, watching the land change colors as the sun sank deeper. For the first time, Mara wasn't thinking about the next place she needed to travel, or the dangers she needed to avoid, or the weight she carried alone. She was thinking about the moment she was living in, about the peace she had found, about the man beside her who had opened his door without hesitation. When evening returned, they headed back to the house. The sky was a deep blue now, the stars beginning to appear. Mara paused at the porch steps and looked back at the land one more time. This place, she whispered. It feels like home. Ethan stood behind her, his voice gentle. It can be, if you want it to. Mara turned to him. In her eyes, there was gratitude, relief, and something new, something hopeful, something warm, something she had never let herself feel before. You've given me more than a place to sleep, she said. You gave me safety. You gave me peace. You gave me a chance to breathe. And you gave me company, Ethan said. Something I didn't know I needed. Their eyes held each other for a long, quiet moment. They didn't need big words. They didn't need promises. The understanding between them was clear and gentle. Mara stepped closer. Then, I think I'd like to stay, she said softly. Not just for a few days, but longer. As long as this place will have me. Ethan felt warmth spread through his chest, deep, steady, and peaceful. Mara, he said, you're welcome here. Always. She smiled, a smile full of trust and calm hope. Then I'm home, she whispered. And from that day forward, the lonely cowboy and the wandering woman began a new life together, slowly, gently, and honestly. Not with grand declarations, but with quiet mornings, shared work, warm evenings, and the comforting knowledge that neither of them had to carry their loneliness alone anymore. The ranch, once silent and empty, now held laughter, conversation, and the steady footsteps of two people who had finally found a place where they belonged. For Ethan, home was no longer just a house on quiet land. For Mara, home was no longer a distant idea she thought she would never find. They found home in each other,